Welcome to another episode of Telugu Tales. In the February edition, we talked to Mr. Parvathaneni about the hot topic that was happening. It was the topic of deportations. 104 Indians were deported. What is the reason? Are the rest of Indians going to be deported? If you are illegal here, what rights do you have? What is happening to the students? We also talked about Laken Riley Act. Why was this act imposed? What is the impact of it? We also talked about the rhetoric that's going on about students being deported, ICE raids happening in restaurants. Stay tuned and watch till the end of the video for you to understand the impact on immigration on the February edition. So the hot topic is ICE. What do you think about ICE? Should we be careful about ICE?
So ICE is the enforcement arm of the DHS. So enforcement arm means specifically they have the power to arrest people. So you have Department of Homeland Security, then you have ICE, US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then you have USCIS. So normally most of the people deal with USCIS. You either do a H1B filing, you do some other filing, a green card filing, you're dealing with USCIS. USCIS does not enforce. Enforce means the power to arrest, enforce the laws, and so on. So ICE, anytime people hear the word ICE, they get worried. The reason is they can arrest people. They have that authority. But again, US, the good thing is we have due process. So it is not that ICE will arrest anybody at any point of time for no reason or anything. And it is also not that ICE will go and raid the universities, ICE will raid the restaurants or anything of that sort. But ICE is a government agency where they can enforce immigration laws. And if somebody is not following it, they have the power to arrest somebody. So that is where ICE comes into picture. And because of this arrest power, definitely people fear them.
So what about knowing your rights? Let's say somebody comes across and says, I'm from ICE and I'm a student. What rights do I have and how much of information can I disclose?
Sure. And I think with all the rhetoric that is happening nowadays, I don't think any student should fear that ICE is going to randomly walk up to them and ask all these questions. Again, in the current scenario in the immigration world, I think everybody's worried. What if ICE comes in and talks to me? What if ICE asks all these questions and so on? It's a possibility. Yes, it's a possibility, but I don't think a normal person will see ICE in general. That being said, if they ever get stopped by ICE, the first thing is they need to verify that it is a nice officer, because there is a difference. Police, which comes under the local state, the police power, and then the ICE. ICE is a federal agency. Police, if somebody gets a traffic ticket or if some police stops somebody, they do not ask about the immigration status. So if they do, typically it is illegal. And in general, you'll never see a scenario where a police stops for some reason and then starts questioning you about your immigration status. For example, the police, for example, in Dallas, it never happens where a police starts investigating and says, hey, what is your immigration status? Show me the documents about your immigration. It typically doesn't happen that way. So what I always say is, if you get stopped by a ICE officer, they come under the federal government. They do have that power. And our rights is be very respectful. The first thing you do is you be very respectful to the ICE officer. At the same time, do not produce any false documents. Do not give any false statements. And if everything is good, say you are in status and everything is good, what I think everybody should do is at least show your documents to prove your status. For example, you're a student. Try to give your identification and tell your status. Do not ever lie about your citizenship. Do not ever make a false claim to US citizenship. If you say I'm an United States citizen and you're not, it's a big offense, and tomorrow it could lead to a permanent bar from United States. So do not make any false claims of United States citizenship. Do not make any false statements. But then I starts asking you more and more questions. You're not comfortable. There is this beauty in United States legal system, which is the right to remain silent. Exercise that right. Stay silent, remain silent. Tell the ICE officer very respectfully that you do want to exercise that right to remain silent, and you want to talk to an attorney. ICE officers are very professional. No matter what comes out in the social media, these are professional people. They are supposed to uphold the law. And what that means is you want to stay silent. You don't want to talk. They will respect that. So if you see something bad, kind of questions are being asked and you're not comfortable or something is wrong with your status, exercise your right to remain silent, ask for an attorney, and let the attorney start talking to ICE on your behalf.
Okay, so you could say, I have the right to remain silent, and any questions from here, I would probably have my attorney answer. And is that a fair way to assess that kind of situation?
Again, now most of the people, I think typically should not have a problem, because if somebody is, like, say, on H1B status or F1 status or some other legal status, most of the time, the minute they show their identification document, they're on their way, typically. And again, ICE is not going after each and everybody that looks like a foreigner and they're not asking all these questions. They are doing targeted enforcement. And so it is very rare that this even happens, that you randomly run into a nice officer and they start asking you all these questions. It does not happen that way. But for some reason, if you're stopped, yes, you do have that right. And I think what I advise is simply say, once you produce your identification, simply say that you want to stay silent and you want to exercise that right, and then ask for an attorney. Because if in doubt, always let the attorney deal with the legal aspects, and don't make any statements, because any statements that you make can and will be used against you at a later stage. So to avoid any issues, avoid any perjury, avoid any misrepresentations, always simply stay silent, let the attorney get involved, and then discuss with ICE.
So what about the 140 or 104 deportations that happened to India? There was a military flight that actually flew in. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So what we are hearing is most of the people, I mean, pretty much everybody that got deported back, they did not have valid status. And more than likely, they came into the country illegally. We don't have the entire set of facts yet. But again, based on what we are seeing in the media, based on their statements, the people who have been sent back, they have given some statements. So it looks like they have paid some people some money and they snuck into the border. So it's not like they came in legally on like some B1, B2 or F1 and then overstayed. It looks like these people were apprehended at the border, and because they came into the country without any legal papers, these were the set of people that were sent back. And again, the number is very small. And the media, I mean, I think again the media and USCIS and all the information that is coming out, they're talking about almost 700,000 Indians staying without proper status in US. That is the number, the kind of number we are hearing. And the flight, I mean, it was less than 200. So it is a very small number. And even in the next couple of days, weeks, months, I don't think they have plans to deport thousands and thousands of people back to India, for example, because we're talking about India. So I think the number is small, and I think it is a very, very targeted deportation. And I think they're trying to target some set of people, not everybody that is out of status. And when I say targeted, what is coming out of official channels is that they are targeting people with a criminal background. And I don't think their goal is to deport each and everybody in one day. Their goal is to immediately tackle the problem of people being in the country with a criminal background. That is who they're targeting right now. And what we are seeing is ICE is targeting people who have a criminal background, and they have some data. So they expect so-and-so person is at so-and-so location. They go for this person with a criminal background. And unfortunately, there are some collateral arrests. They go try to catch him. There are some people around him who are also out of status, and it's a collateral damage. They're getting caught, and they're in this mess. But I think the whole purpose of this initial, at least this initial mass deportation, is to go after people with a criminal background. So what I suspect would happen even in the next couple of weeks is people with criminal background. When we talk about people with criminal background, very, very bad criminals, rapists, child abusers, murderers, gang members. So these are the kind of people I think are going to get targeted even in the next couple of months. And based on the ICE data, what will happen is wherever these guys are, they will go and target those locations. And if there are some other people without status in that circumstances, I think those probably will get impacted.
Okay. So the rhetoric that I get to hear from a lot of Telugu media is like, our kids are being deported, our students are being sent back, they're being shackled. That's not true for the most part.
I definitely think the things are being overblown. I mean, obviously, I mean, we're not seeing cases where ICE is going after every student and then catching them and harassing them, detaining them. No, I don't see that happening. I mean, in Dallas, we have a huge student population. I'm not seeing that happen. and the surrounding cities like Austin and all the surrounding cities have huge student population. We're talking about F1 students. So we are not seeing mass raids where they're going and targeting these F1 students. We're not seeing that. The only thing that we are seeing is they're targeting places where they suspect people who are criminals and without proper status are probably hiding. Maybe they're working at some restaurant. Maybe they're at some apartment complex. Maybe something else. So those are the people that we are seeing are getting targeted. I don't definitely see students being targeted and harassed. I don't think that is happening. But again, what I want everybody is comply with whatever is required out of your status. For example, you're a student. You're supposed to go to school. You can work on campus. You can't work off campus. And you have to make progress towards your degree, which means you cannot keep failing classes. You have to make progress, because if you fail classes, you'll be in academic probation, you might lose your status. So keep doing what you're supposed to do. I don't think you'll have to worry about anything else. And a lot of what is coming in the media, this mass hysteria, I think it is not true, because we are not seeing that kind of an impact to F1 students, because F1 students are people who came into the country in a legal way. So they were actually inspected and admitted into the country. And those are not the kind of people we are seeing having an issue, unless somebody has a bad criminal history, and that is when ICE is targeting them.
So what about the false news that goes around that keeps the fear alive amongst the community, right? What do you have to tell them?
Sure. I think what is happening is maybe there is an isolated incident and it is getting blown out of proportion. And I'll tell you the reason why I think it is overblown. I've had cases that I've heard in the month of December, even before President Trump took his presidency, and last year, a long time even before the elections. So occasionally we do hear about cases where somebody is at the port of entry and they're inspected, and at that time the CBP officer is not satisfied. They took the phones and they saw something incriminating on the phone, and they got deported back. So these kind of things were happening even last year. And these things are extremely rare because most of the people try to follow the rules. So those occasional deportation issues that do happen, that used to happen even last year. Once in a while we hear these things, that somebody has been stopped at the airport, their phones were taken, they were analyzed, and the CBP officer was not happy, maybe they misrepresented something, they got deported. This is something that was always happening on a very, very low scale. And this month of January and like February. So this week I heard one or two cases. Last week I heard one or two cases. So we do hear cases occasionally that follow this fact pattern, where somebody is coming into the country, maybe a student, maybe a H1B, and the CBP officer deports them back. So now the social media, some of the news, I don't think it is fake, but it is like one out of like a couple of thousands. So the percentage is like very, very small. But they are overblowing that one small incident and making it look like it is happening on a large scale. No, it is not happening on a large scale. The same probability that we had last year, I think it is happening, because that is the job of CBP officers. They're supposed to inspect everybody and ask questions and so on. Not satisfied, people get sent back. That happened before, that is happening now. So it is in the same ratio. I don't think it is on a larger scale, but that even that one incident, I think because they're seeing these other incidents of mass deportation, other things that are happening, and people are tending to think that things are happening on a large scale. No, it's not on the large scale. It is whatever was before is what is happening. There is increased scrutiny, yes, but again, definitely not on a large scale where people are getting stopped at the airport and being sent back, or people are being arrested at schools, put in detention. No, that kind of a large scale thing is definitely not happening. There is definitely more scrutiny, and I think it's a good time for everybody to kind of just look at what the rules are, kind of get educated, follow the rules.
Step back and see.
That's all it is. I don't think you have to worry too much, because things, for people who are following the rules, I don't think things have changed at all. Be prepared for more scrutiny. What that means is a good time for everybody to learn what the rules are.
Okay. So so the other thing I keep hearing is all the Dallas restaurant owners, they're running low on their business because all the students have pulled back on the unauthorized work that is happening. And the restaurants owners are also having, or the grocery store owners are also having a fact check. And I don't know if you've seen, there is also a note that is sent out saying that only hiring H4 people now. Do you think that's also a good thing for the community to happen?
And again, I think I'll tell you what my take is on this topic. And I think in the media, I think especially a lot of the social media that a lot of Indian people follow, I think we're seeing news where they say, hey, the Indian restaurant owners are worried, the Indian business people are worried because they're hiring illegal people in their restaurants. So I've seen this news come out in the social media, or like probably like you said, like some cities like Dallas or like cities where there's a lot of Indian population. And my answer for that is, according to official statistics, there are about 15 million illegal immigrants in this country. At least that is what is the official statistic. 15 million. 15 million is a huge number. And what they're saying is this 15 million people are, at least majority of them, are doing illegal jobs in this country without status. And what that means is, if you look at the construction industry, if you look at other restaurants, say non-Indian businesses, Mexican restaurants or even like McDonald's or a lot of other restaurants, construction sites, HVAC, plumbing companies, and so on. So a lot of these companies need labor. So this 15 million people are not Indians.
Correct.
But we know that there are 15 million illegal people out here, and a majority of them are working. Houses getting constructed, bridges getting constructed. So obviously, it is not touching only Indian restaurants or Indian businesses. It is touching businesses all across US. And people are getting employed without their status being checked. Agricultural farms and so on. And what that means is, it's not just Indian businesses, it's not just Chinese businesses or Mexican businesses. I think in general, there are a lot of businesses who are hiring illegal people. And I think what the government is planning to do is, and they're already talking about it, criminal sanctions, criminal prosecution of these employers who are hiring people without, knowingly they're hiring these people, knowing that these people are illegal aliens. So those kind of companies might be hit with some criminal penalties down the line. And I think these are all possibilities. But how the Trump administration will do it, we do not know. But definitely this is a problem not limited to Indian community or one street in Dallas or one street in some other place. Across United States, I think we have a lot of businesses who are hiring illegal aliens. And I think going forwards, I think we will see what the Trump administration will do. But I think right now, whatever is happening, I think it's a deterrent. It's a deterrent for a lot of people that there is a problem. If you're on F1 visa or if you're on some other visa and we're working illegally, it could jeopardize our career. So it's probably an eye-opener for a lot of people to kind of follow what their visa requires of them. And what that means is if somebody's on F1, somebody's on some other status, make sure you follow the terms of your visa status. Do not work without authorization. That's probably an eye-opener for a lot of people going forwards. But again, because people do ask me, hey, somebody is complaining about this business hiring somebody. There are like lots of those businesses. So I don't think it is like one community or just localized city or something. It is a problem. It is 15 million people without status are more than likely in this country. And again, a lot of them are not criminals. It's the percentage of criminals is very, very few. Most of the people are here maybe for necessity, and they're just trying to feed their family and do a lot of hard work. That being said, rules are rules, and everybody has to follow the regulations, which is why we'll have to wait and see how the Trump administration will deal with people with a criminal background and people without a criminal background, but still out of status. And I think time will tell, because taking a drastic step would mean that it's going to crush the local economies. Not just Indian restaurants, for example. A lot of other businesses that are hiring these people. So it's going to crush the local economies. So whatever the government does has to be slow, and at the same time make sure that we're not impacting our country. Because at the end, the economy of US is very important. So my take is there is a problem, but at the same time, economy is also important. And the advice for everybody is we just follow the regulations, we just follow the rules, and just keep up with the law.
So you talked about keeping up with the rules, be compliant, right? And how do you view President Trump's first term? Because we are talking after he got elected. The last time we spoke, Mr. Biden was the president. So the first month of chaos, do you think this is going to hang on for the rest of 4 years, or is it just the beginning? What is your take?
Sure. So I think it's pretty much getting close to third week of President Trump's presidency. So we are seeing a lot of chaos that's going on. But I think, President Trump is a highly educated person. He has very, very good degrees from a very good university, and he's a very successful businessman. And he wants a good legacy. And as a president, the good legacy means that you are making sure the country is strong, the country's economy is good. So I'm very positive that in the end, he wants a great legacy. And to me, what that means is it's not this first 1 to 3 weeks. It is what people will talk about him once his presidency is done. People will talk about his presidency only if he keeps the country safe, strong, and then the economy is great, because economy is super important. People need jobs. People have to feed their families. So economy is super important. And at least I'm going to be positive, and I think that he will not do anything to jeopardize the strength of the economy. And what that means is he will try to ensure that whatever decisions they take are in the best interests of the country, and the best interests of the country are that the economy is strong, job market is good, and so on. Definitely a lot of chaos going on. We have to wait and watch. And if you look at 2016 to 2020, things were tough. On the immigration side, we saw a lot of H1B denials. But as a whole, if you look at how things were, I don't think the economy went south. And economy was strong. The job market was good, 2016 to 2020. Looking at historical precedents, yes, I do think that immigration will be a little bit challenging. It will be a little bit tough. But in terms of the country's economy, I'm pretty positive about what I think would happen in the next 4 years. But again, right decisions are not taken, it will crush the economies. And the way I think the mass deportations are being talked about, we have 15 million people without proper status in this country. And 15 million do contribute to US economy. So we are in challenging times, but at the same time, I think any president, I think they know their job, they know their duty. The duty is towards the country and keeping the country safe. So I'm just hoping that President Trump does the same thing.
So what are the impacts that you see from President Trump's changes on the H1?
So January 18th, a new set of rules came into picture, and this was like 2 days before President Trump took office. And starting January 18th, because of the new rules, because of the new administration, and because of this rhetoric, we are seeing a drastic drop in the nature of companies filing for the H1Bs. They're so worried, and they're thinking twice, because the whole thing is, do we even need to hire somebody here? Do I even need to file for a H1B for somebody here? So I'm kind of seeing that kind of a thinking process start with a lot of companies that we are working with. And I think what I would have seen it as good is if, say, okay, I don't want to hire somebody on H1B. I'm going to hire somebody locally. That's a good message. If they're doing it, I think it would have been a good thing, because it's going to help US economy. But what I am seeing is a lot of these companies, they're coming and saying, we need talent. When I say talent, we need this technology. We need work to be done with this technology right away. We are not finding enough people here locally. So what that is leading to is they are trying to outsource jobs to other countries, maybe India, maybe other countries where they immediately can find people with that technology. So what that means is, if companies get discouraged to hire here because there are people not available locally with that technology that they require for their business, and they're not able to file for a H1B because of all these new regulations, what I feel is going to happen is more and more people are going to look at outsourcing to other countries, or more and more companies are going to start looking at opening offices abroad. And to me, that looks like a dangerous trend, because in that case, the jobs are going to go out of the country. And but at this point of time, it looks like a lot of companies are waiting and watching. They don't want to make big, huge hiring decisions because the administration just changed. And I can tell that definitely in the last 2-3 weeks, we have seen a huge drop in the number of H1B filings by a lot of companies.
So the impact of these changes, right? Let's talk about changes to a couple of segments. One is the service-oriented segment, like companies like TCS, Cognizant. And at a later point, we'll talk about the consultancies that are owned here. We'll talk about that. But tell us, what specific impact do you see on TCS, CTS, service-oriented companies?
Sure. And I think, so the reason we're seeing an impact is because the new rules say that the IT services companies, the consulting companies, they have some additional requirements going forwards. And that additional requirement is, now, if it is an IT services company, we are required to show contracts. We're required to show the vendor documents or the client letters and so on. So as a part of the new rules, they added a lot of additional burden to the services companies, to the consulting services companies. And this, I think, is the main reason why a lot of companies are discouraged, because it's adding a lot more to their filing process, and it's adding to a lot more confusion and adding to a lot more burden to prove their cases. And pre 2025, pre-January 18th, what used to happen is the client letters, the vendor letters, the contracts, these are not mandatory documents required for the filing. So the burden was very less, and the companies, they want to focus on their business. They want to hire and get started on the job. They don't want to sit and waste time on the RFEs and the legal process. So I think the legal process definitely became a lot more complex for the consulting companies. For the full-time companies, if the company is a good company, they have good solid tax returns, they have the ability to pay, they have good hiring history. So the full-time companies, I don't think the rules have changed majorly, but it is the services sector that I think we are seeing more restrictions when they file for their H1Bs.
Okay. And in terms of rule changes, right, what is the one major rule that you think stands out for you? You're like, wow, this is a total game changer. Do you have one thing that sticks out?
Yes. The main thing is the client letters, vendor letters, and contracts. Previously, starting from 2020 to 2024, those were not mandatory. If a company had a job and the company intended to pay the employee that salary, they could go ahead and file the case. The new rule is you need client letters, you need vendor letters, and you need contracts. If it is a case where it's a consultancy company or a services company filing for a third-party worksite. Why that is so challenging is because the contracts are typically not given for 3 years. And a lot of times contracts, they get delayed. The terms are not very clear in the contracts, in the purchase orders, short-term contracts, and all these things. And now going forwards, USCIS will analyze these contracts. And what that means is short-term approvals, or maybe causing more issues, or asking for sometimes what happens is you have multiple layers. You have an end client, maybe Apple, and you have this consulting company, maybe say TCS, or maybe another small consulting shop. You have multiple layers in between. And it is very, very hard, extremely hard to get the contracts between each and every party. So now USCIS has the authority to ask for contract between various layers or whatever they deem fit to prove the case. So this is what I think is going to drastically slow down the filing timelines and also give USCIS more reason to arbitrarily deny more cases. And that unknown, that contracts, the unknown uncertainty, short-term contracts, and all those things were not there pre-January 18th, 2025. And in the new regulations, that's going to be a big challenge.
So now there's two kinds of impacts that I can see here. One is the duration of the adjudication itself, and the other one is it can lead to a lesser number of approvals as well. Do you sort of agree with what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, at least it's too early to comment because the Trump administration just took over and we had a number of filings in the new rules. At this point of time, I've not seen any weird RFEs or anything out of the blue. And even for short-term contracts, at this point of time, USCIS has been approving for 3 years because sometimes the contracts are only for 6 months. But looks like as long as we're proving that the job is a bona fide job on the day of filing, at this point of time, USCIS seems to be giving for 3 years. They're still a little bit lenient, but because it is such a new rule and it is just the start of the new administration, I think as things move ahead, I think they'll be focusing more and more on the exact terms of the purchase order, asking for more client requirements, asking for client letters, and so on. Going into the future, I think it will be a challenge. At this point of time, I think as long as we can at least show that on the day of filing we have a bona fide assignment, things are not as bad as the new rules make it out to be. But I think definitely in the next couple of days, I think things could change.
So you bring up a very good point where you said, now now USCIS has the authority to ask contracts. And I've done a little bit of consulting myself, and the moment you request for a contract, no company is comfortable to give out the contract because there's a lot of information that I wouldn't want to make public because it's all a part of that contract. So you see that to become an eventual problem for all these companies hiring?
So, like you said, I think you're totally right. A lot of these contracts have confidentiality clauses because there are a lot of terms and people don't want things being disclosed. And again, we have multiple layers in between. Sometimes you have a vendor, a sub-vendor, multiple layers where they don't want to disclose their contracts. 2016 to 2020, we used to see a lot of denials when the contracts were not disclosed, contracts between all the parties. So if you have multiple layers, we needed contracts between all the parties back then. And the new administration has just started, and now we have a USCIS regulation where they say that they could request all these documents. So, what kind of burden we will have in the future? What kind of harsh decisions we will see in terms of adjudications? We're not sure at this point, but historically we have precedents. We have seen that if all the documents, all the contracts were not disclosed and they were not proper, we did see denials. We did see very short-term approvals for like 1 day, 2 day. We've seen this in the past. Into the future, at this point we don't know. But again, the whole requirement of having to show all these things itself puts in a lot of uncertainty into this H1B process. So what we are suggesting the employers is, as much as possible, try to make sure you have clean contracts, and try to get vendor letters, try to get client letters. Even if you don't get the underlying contracts, at least try to get a letter from the client clarifying the terms of your contract, and then file your H1B. That being said, it does cause a lot of uncertainty into the process, a lot of delays. But again, at this point, we are telling all our clients to be conservative and do get these documents from the clients and vendors and put it as a part of your filing, rather than risk an RFE and then having to chase the vendors and the clients, and then eventually we don't know what's going to happen.
What is so unique about the remote work? A lot of conversation on the remote work with the change in the rule. What about that?
So in terms of remote work, I don't think we're going to have any problem. From a USCIS perspective, it does not matter. As long as the company is getting the work done like they promised, they're paying the employees the salary that they promised, I don't think USCIS will have a problem with remote work conditions, because majority of the filings for H1B, they are for IT employees, highly specialized IT employees. And in IT industry, it is kind of an accepted fact that yes, you can work from home if the employer agrees. But however, more recently, the trend we are seeing for our filings is more and more less 100% remote, more and more hybrid kind of a model. So hybrid kind of a model is where the employee has a choice. He can go work for the employer at their location, also work from home. So more and more of our recent filings are hybrid model. That being said, we still have a lot of 100% remote filings. And the way the new administration is going to look at those things is, I don't think they'll have a problem. The only change is the new regulations, the new rules say that the FDNS visits can happen at the home of these employees. So if the H1B is filed with the employee's home, the employee should be ready to let the FDNS officers, if they come and try to do a site visit. So that is the only challenge. So a lot of people like privacy, so they don't want people to come into their house. But if a H1B is filed with a remote work location where somebody is working from home, the only thing is be prepared that a FDNS officer can at any point of time come into your house and inspect your working conditions. So if people don't have a problem with that privacy thing, yes, they're 100% allowed to work from home, and USCIS has been approving those cases. And as long as things are done the right way, and the right way is, if the company is saying somebody is supposed to work from home, make sure the LCA says that, make sure the LCA has that location, make sure you're paying the right wage. If that is being done, I don't think from an adjudication perspective, from an approval perspective, it should not cause any problem.
Tell us about the FDNS visit.
So in the old regulations, if an FDNS officer visits your house and knocks at your door, you had a right to basically refuse to participate. So the participation in this entire FDNS was voluntary. What that means is, if you're not comfortable, you could say, I'm not comfortable, I don't want to participate in this FDNS visit, and you could refuse the officer. And in the past, what would happen is the officer would leave, and they would just basically, with the information that they had in place, they would finish the report. We never really saw any issues with that in the past. Going forwards, because of the new rules and regulations that came on January 18th, 2025, what they have done is FDNS visit is now mandatory. And mandatory in a sense that if somebody decides not to participate in an FDNS visit, tomorrow they risk getting their H1B revoked or H1B denied. So that possibility is there, and this is a part of the new regulation that came out and is effective starting January 18th. So now FDNS visits are compulsory. And how USCIS would react if somebody refuses, we don't have enough data yet, but I would not be surprised if they either their H1B gets revoked or they get a notice of intent to revoke, and USCIS takes a detrimental decision if participation is not allowed. So that is the challenge that we are going to see with remote work getting into the future.
So, as a pro bono, we do this to our viewers. We have two questions from Telugu Tales viewers. I'll ask you the first question. The first question is, I'm not going to reveal much details, but this kid is in a position and he's working, but he was on bench for the past 8 months. Now he has an opportunity with a different employer. He wants to move. Can he do that? Because he has not been paid for the past 8 months on an active H1B. What should be his course of action?
So I think a lot of people have the situation where their employer is not following the rules. They're illegally benching their employees. And then the employee is like tired. He starts looking for another opportunity. He gets another opportunity. And the new employer, they're ready to file the H1. And the first thing they ask is, hey, we need your last recent pay statements to file the transfer. And unfortunate reality is that pay statements are required because we do need to prove to USCIS that somebody is working in a legal status on H1B to do a transfer. But when somebody is in this unfortunate situation where their employer is not following the rules, so what we suggest those kind of folks to do is you go and file a complaint with Department of Labor. And you let the Department of Labor know that you have been illegally been benched, because benching is illegal. In these kind of situations, I think we advise two things. One, they can apply for a transfer in consular processing. If they apply for a transfer in consular processing, USCIS typically does not come back and ask about the pay statements, because somebody needs to go out of the country and then re-enter. And that is one way of handling when somebody does not have pay statements. The other option is, because it is not your fault, it is the employer's fault, because employer has illegally benched somebody, you file a formal complaint, you document all what has happened, you document your communications with your employer, submit all that evidence to USCIS. And we have seen cases where USCIS was liberal sometimes, or sometimes they might just simply say, hey, go out of the country, get stamping and come back. But the H1B will not be denied in general. The only thing is the I-94 may or may not be issued. And if the I-94 is not issued, they might have to go out, get stamping and come back. Because you, at the time of stamping, if they convince the the Department of State, the consular officer, that it is not their fault, more than likely they should not have any problem with the visa stamping for that reason.
Got it. So it's really the employer's problem. It is not the individual's problem if they are not being paid.
So the H1B regulations are very clear. If a company has filed an H1B, benching is illegal. And what benching means is, if somebody says, hey, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to come to office and work. If the employer says, no, we don't have a project, you stay at home till we find a project, and they don't pay them, that is illegal. That is benching. That is classic definition of benching. And benching is illegal. Employer cannot bench somebody and not pay. They either have to pay, or if they don't want to pay, they have to terminate the employment, notify USCIS. So that needs to happen. And if the employer does not properly notify USCIS about the termination, but illegally bench somebody, they are still liable to pay. And normally DOL, if they get involved, they make the employers pay.
Okay. The next Telugu Tales viewer, her question was pretty straightforward. She's being abused by her husband. She's on a dependent. She's on H4. Her husband is on H1. She has the fear of her status if she were to go and complain, or she was to go and lodge a police officer. What kind of protection does she get?
So again, if anybody, I think if somebody is getting abused, I think the first thing they should do is probably like walk out of that residence. But again, legally, I think they have a lot of recourse. From an immigration perspective, there is something called U visa. I always ask people to explore U visa, talk to an attorney about the immigration aspect and the U visa, because they might qualify for a U visa. That is one thing they can do from a immigration perspective. And again, from a legal perspective, again, they can get temporary restraining orders because sometimes they don't have a place to stay. So they might take some legal help, get a temporary restraining order where the husband cannot be near them, be in contact with them, be in that residence, and so on. There are a lot of legal avenues open. And what I immediately suggest is, there are two people that they need to talk to. One, an immigration attorney, because if they're worried about status, talk to an immigration attorney. There are like various recourses available for somebody in that situation. And then the second person is a family attorney, because more than likely you might need a restraining order filed against that abusive spouse, and that is very critical. You need to get some legal protection so they cannot come and hurt you. So anytime there is abuse, immediately react, get some legal help, and the law really has some good recourse to people who are under that unfortunate situation.
So explain us about the Laken Riley Act.
So Laken Riley, so she was a nursing student in Georgia, and unfortunately she got murdered. And she got murdered by this person who was in the country illegally. Not only was he in the country illegally, but what has happened was he got arrested for a crime previously, and for some reason the legal system set him out of jail. So he was out in the open after being charged with some crime. And during elections, this topic was raised a lot. It was a huge election topic. And President Trump, he mentioned multiple times that once he's back in office, his first signing of an act would be an act where it would protect people like Laken Riley. And in response to that, so the first act that the Congress passed, so when I say the act, it is not an executive order. It's an act where the Senate passed, the House of Representatives passed, and then it is on President Trump's desk to sign. So this act was passed and it was signed by President Trump in the last week of January 29th. And this act has some harsh rules. And the rules are that if somebody, some illegal alien, somebody who's in the country without a valid status, commits a crime as simple as a shoplifting. It's still a crime, but it is shoplifting, or one of the other enumerated list in that list. If they commit a crime, what will happen is they will get detained, they will be arrested, and they'll not be eligible for bail, because normally the due process is you get a lawyer, you apply for bail, you get bail. But the new rules say that you don't have due process. You just even the minute you are charged, you are stuck in jail until the judge decides the case. So the act, what it does is it makes mandatory detention, and then somebody cannot get a bail. And if the federal authorities are not doing this, if the federal authorities are not detaining somebody, it gives the states the authority, the power to sue the federal government and force the federal government to detain somebody and not release them. So this is what the Laken Riley Act says. The reason it is so harsh is because usually in United States, we talk about due process. And due process means just because somebody is arrested for a crime does not mean they are guilty. They have to go through the legal process. And what that means is somebody can get bail. They can be out on bail while the case goes through. And only when they're convicted and when the judge says or the jury says somebody has done the crime, they're convicted of that crime, that is when they typically get arrested. And in the fallout of this act, now people will be stuck in jail. And if somebody is doing a job, that means that they cannot get out. So they are pretty much stuck. And it could even impact other people on a valid visa. It could even impact green card holders in a different way. And the way the law is written, there is a lot of ambiguity, and we expect a lot of litigation. But it has a very good chance of impacting even legal people with legal status, such as green card holders and people with a visa, because it gives states the authority to sue the federal government whenever they think the federal government is not detaining somebody. So we expect to see a lot of litigation going forwards. But at this point of time, I think the message is there is this act. This act has a power to detain people without a chance for a bail. And what that means is everybody should be cautious and not commit any of these crimes. And this includes shoplifting, because sometimes I've seen cases where people make some bad choices and get into things like shoplifting. You might think it's only $10 and you're committing a simple shoplifting crime, but on the immigration side, it has huge repercussions now because of this act. So any kind of shoplifting, any kind of driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, these are the kind of things that people should be very cautious and not even get close to them, even if somebody has legal status or even if somebody has a green card or anything. Just stay away from them, because this act has a potential to impact pretty much any non-citizen.
Thing that keeps getting talked about is the birthright citizenship. I know a couple of judges have blocked it already, but do you think that to be a distant possibility anytime soon that's going to happen?
So the birthright citizenship, I definitely don't think it will happen in the next 4 years. I would be very, very surprised if that happens. I'm very skeptical, and there is a reason for it. So in the U.S. legal system, there is something called legal precedence, and legal precedence means if one court makes a decision, a court on top of it can always review and make changes, but the courts below it cannot change the decision, which is why it was very clear on day one that the courts will grant an injunction. And right now we have a permanent injunction in the courts. We also have heard that President Trump's administration, they're appealing it, so it'll go for an appeal, and it'll be in the circuit court, and more than likely the circuit court will again block it. They will grant an injunction. The circuit courts don't have a choice because there is legal precedence. We had this case, the same set of facts in 1800s. The circuit court in the appeals, it will get blocked. Then that's what will be the next thing that will happen. Eventually, it is going to end up in the Supreme Court. And what's going to happen in the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court will again, they don't have to follow the prior Supreme Court's order. But again, in the legal justice system, the Supreme Court gives a lot of value to the previous decisions. They will clearly study the previous decision. They will see if things have majorly changed, or they will do all this kind of analysis. And these are very, very highly learned judges. Even though we say, yes, this court has a conservative majority, more Republican-leaning judges, even though that is true, in general, we don't see judges take very, very blatant decisions where they contradict the prior decisions. And the reason for that is this legal justice system is so strong because of legal precedent. So more than likely what's going to happen is Supreme Court will say it is something that the Congress has to decide. And they will say that more than likely a constitutional amendment is required because we already have these things in the Constitution. Courts have interpreted what's out there in those amendments. So I don't think that Supreme Court will get involved, and it'll end up being something for the Constitution to be amended. Constitutional amendments are not easy. They are very, very tough. They are very time consuming. So because of all these reasons, I don't think this is something that will happen in the next 4 years. That being said, a topic is out there and people have started discussing about this topic. So when people discuss about this topic at a certain point of time, if there is enough support for that, in the distant future, probably it is going to happen, but not because right now the stats, at least what the media is showing, there is not huge support in the local public to remove birthright citizenship. So for these reasons, I don't think a constitutional amendment would be possible anytime in the near future. Maybe in the distant future it is a possibility, but definitely not in the next 4 years.
Right now we are in the February edition. We said we are going to meet every month. We will try to make. I think we are trying. Our mission is to keep the community well informed, not misinformed. Have you been following the rhetoric that the regional Telugu media has been doing? What is your message for Indian parents out there?
I do see is, unfortunately, I think in social media there is good and then there is bad. And as any human, the thing is when you see some news that is concerning, you tend to react and you tend to get worried. And what I see out there is there is a lot of news. I would not call it as completely fake, but I think it is being overblown in proportion. So a small incident is being overblown in proportion. And what that is doing is, I think a lot of people out there, especially there are parents out there in India, and they know their kids are out here to work hard. They know their kids are here not to do any crimes. They're trying to work hard, do their job, do whatever they're supposed to do, and get a better career. And they're just worried. They're just worried that are they getting sucked into this immigration rhetoric, and are they going to run into any problems? And I think my message is nothing drastic is changing for people who are legally following the rules. Most of the people here are either on H1B or on F1 or some other valid status. So for all these people who are on valid status, I don't think anything is going to be a problem. I don't think people have to worry about their family members here on legal status. I would just encourage parents out there to encourage your family members, your children out here to follow the rules, which is do not work without authorization, do not drink and drive, do not do any kind of shoplifting, these kind of things, which as any parent, I'm pretty sure that every parent will give that message to their kids. And I don't think people with legal status have to worry at all in general. And I think it's people who have a criminal background. Those are the people I think are getting chased, being targeted by ICE, by USCIS, and all these other immigration bodies. So people who don't have a criminal record, I don't think you'd have to worry. And I think the message for the parents out there is you don't have to worry too much. Nothing drastic is happening out here. People still have good jobs. People are still being respected for the skills they're bringing into this country. And nothing is changing overnight. It is just that the media is overblowing this out of proportion. We're not seeing major deportations. We're not seeing people getting arrested in thousands and thousands and thousands. No. 3 weeks in Trump's presidency, we have seen about 10,000 arrests. And majority of these arrests are people who have snuck into this country without any valid papers and have criminal histories. So these are the kind of people I think that are having an issue. People who are here studying on F1 visa, working on H1 visa, there is no backlash, there is no immigration backlash, there is nothing changing majorly on that front.
So what about the H1B fever that is around the corner? A lot of people entering the lottery again this year. How do you see the February shape up?
So we're very close to March. So March is when the H1B lottery opens up, and pretty much every company that wants a new H1B, they will get into the lottery pool. We already started getting so many inquiries, and we're already starting to get started. USCIS announced that starting from March 7th, people can register in the H1B lottery. We do think it will be oversubscribed. I think the number will be a little bit less than last year. And I think the reason for that is I think the job market is still good, because if you look at the unemployment numbers that came out last week, we still have very low unemployment, which means there is still demand for jobs. So I definitely think that there will be a H1B lottery. But because of the new rule changes and because of more harsher rules, more than likely, I think we'll see a decrease in the number, but I don't think it will be too lessening of that number. But compared to last year, I think it will be less. At the same time, I think we will have an H1B lottery. It will be oversubscribed.
So if I were to ask you the number of applications for lottery this time, what would be your number?
So I'll tell you what we had 2 years back. 2 years back, it was 800,000.
Okay.
And 800,000 because we had a huge problem with multiple registrations. We had a number of our own clients where they filed multiple cases. And USCIS released this statistics, and they said more than 50% of the cases seem to be multiple registration cases.
Correct.
And so that was 2 years back. Last year, we did not have this multiple registration problem because USCIS solved the problem. And they said it doesn't matter how many registrations somebody gets, it will be based on your passport. So now that whole multiple registration issue was resolved. And then last year we saw that drop to 400,000. So 400,000 was the demand last year. This year, with all this immigration rhetoric, I'm pretty positive there will be a little bit softening of the demand. Number one. Number two, the major thing we are seeing this year is last year it was only $10 for each registration. $10 means left and right people were filing without thinking about the consequences. This year, there is a new rule. The new rule says you have to pay $215 for each H1B registration in March. And what that means is the companies, I think it's a good thing because now the companies will think twice. Only if they really require to hire somebody, they will spend the $215 to register. So this is what I think is going to drastically drop the number of filings from last year. So last year it was 400,000. Now we have this new rule where you have to pay a lot more, $215 versus $10. So my guess is it will be around 250,000 compared to last year's 400,000. That is what I'm guessing. 250,000 is still high because we only have 85,000 slots. The minute you cross 85,000, it has to be a lottery. So I still think it is going to be oversubscribed at least 2 to 3 times.
Okay. Do you think USCIS also needs to make this lottery process a little transparent? Because we don't know what this lottery process encompasses. At least I don't, unless you know something that I don't. Do you think they'll ever make it transparent, fully transparent?
I think in a way, I think it is transparent because they're giving the statistics. So they're kind of saying, okay, so many number of people have applied. Everybody has a randomized sequence. So they get a registration number. So it is randomized. So what they're doing right now is nobody gets any extra preference. It is randomized. And in the random selection, they pick the lottery. And because we have data from a lot of companies, we file for a lot of companies. So when I look at the randomized data, if USCIS says, for example, we had 400,000 registrations, and we know only 85,000 are supposed to be selected. And so we know the ratio. And if I look at the ratio on the large scale, it matches the data they're releasing. So I think it's kind of the number of registrations, I think, is correlating to the selection rate. So I think in a way it's a randomized thing. So right now I think it is random. At a certain point of time, if they go and say it has to be on wage or it's some other factor, then I think we would probably need some more disclosure to see what exactly is going on. But at this point of time, I think from anybody's perspective, the number of applications you get will clearly tell you what is your percentage of selection.
Do you think in the near future or in the far future, whatever it is, do you think there is a possibility that USCIS will start including parameters like wages or the kind of education even at the lottery level?
There is a good chance. President Trump in the old administration in 2020, they did try to do that. So back then they had a proposal and they said, let's add more parameters. And the biggest parameter we want to add is the wages. Because they said whoever gets paid the highest wage, they needs to be given a preference, not somebody who's getting the lowest wage. So they did try to put wage as one of the major parameters. And then there was a court case and they failed in the court. And then President Trump left office. So my guess is, again, I think there's already a talk about changing this randomized method to some better approach, maybe the kind of education they had, or maybe the kind of salary somebody's getting, and so on. So there are proposals out there. It is not easy to implement such proposals. But I think, again, I think these kind of proposals will gain traction because nobody wants randomized. Randomized means, you're not really giving preference to the qualities that you want to look in somebody. Maybe there is an occupation that you think is highly important for the country. Maybe you think somebody with a PhD degree is probably needs to be given more preference, or somebody with a good salary, maybe a high salary, needs to be given preference. So I think there will be some kind of changes, some kind of proposals to include some parameters rather than simply say random and then just like anybody who's picked up randomly are selected.
Chandaru, I really appreciate your time and your patience to be present with us. I think your information has been extremely crucial for our viewers. Thanks again for being here. Do you have any closing thoughts for Telugu Tales viewers or for the community in general, the Indian diaspora?
Sure. I think the big message, because immigration is has been such a topic that everybody is talking about in the last 2-3 weeks because of the new administration, seeing all this deportation news and all these things that are happening out there. I think it's a good idea that everybody take a step back and see what the rules require of them and then follow the rules. And what I mean is, for example, somebody is a student on an F1 visa. And the thing is, you study in school, you get good grades, you learn good technologies. Don't worry about working off campus and flouting the rules, because off campus jobs don't pay you a lot. They pay very little to what you would earn once you graduate. So the goal should be like study hard, get good education, get good skills. And then once you're out of college, you are going to get paid those big bucks, those high salaries. Because when you have the right skills, you will make that salary. And what I've seen a lot of students do is they waste their time in doing these part-time jobs. These part-time jobs don't pay a whole lot. And not only that, they're going to impact their studies. They're going to impact the time they could have used it for upskilling their technology skills. So my advice is just follow the rules, study hard. There are so many jobs out here in US. Technology is going to rule the world. The only jobs that I see are in technology. I don't see jobs in other fields in the United States. So technology, I think, will have a lot of jobs. US is the technology giant. I don't think China can even ever come close to the United States, even in the future. US will always stay ahead in technology. And what that means is, if you have the right skills, you spend time in learning new technologies, you work hard, you don't ever violate any rules and regulations, tomorrow you will get a good job and you will make those big bucks and you will get a good career. So always follow the rules, don't work without authorization, and don't worry too much about what's happening out. What's happening out is more for people who have entered the country illegally, who are not having a valid status, but people who are in this country legally, following the rules, having a valid status, they don't have to worry anything, whether it is President Trump's administration or the prior administration or the next administration. I don't think they will penalize anybody that is following the rules. And I think the governments will be encouraging people to come here in a legal fashion, contribute in a legal fashion. And if you have the right skills, you'll always have a good career.
Thanks a lot, Chansa, for being here again, and I appreciate your time and patience. We will meet again in the month of March, and we'll see if we get more requests from Telugu Tales viewers, and then we'll go ahead do the March edition.
Thank you, Sai, and it was great being a part of Telugu Tales, and I like your vision of using this media to educate the diaspora all over the world, and let people know what is the truth, and then kind of encourage them to follow the rules. So I think it's a great idea, and hopefully we'll educate more and more people, and just give them the information based on the facts. I mean, we don't want to speculate anything, and again, rules are rules. It's not that we support this administration or that administration. For us, sitting at this place, it is more about educating people what the rules are. We don't make the rules. Rules are made by a proper process. We just educate the people so people know the truth, and they don't do anything that will jeopardize their immigration or their future career.
Thanks a lot, Chansab. Thank you.
Thank you.